Esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, honorees, sponsors, co-sponsors, friends. My name is Susan Coleman, and I'm president of the New York City Bar and a litigation partner at Jenner & Block. I am delighted to welcome you here in person for the 4th Annual International Law Conference on the Status of Women. As I think many of you know, and Catherine was just telling me, the first one, or maybe it was the second, was essentially the last event in New York City before it shut down with COVID. It was March 9th, I think, 2020. Then 2 years of a virtual conference, so we could not be happier to be here today in person with all of you. And happy International Women's Day. Woo! Today, of course, is International Women's Day, and on Friday, it will be the 2nd Annual International Day of Women Judges. And today's conference is being held, of course, in conjunction with the UN's 67th session on the status of women. There is much to celebrate on International Women's Day, and we are delighted to honor so many amazing women, heroes all, at this conference. On behalf of the New York City Bar, we are so thrilled to be the home of this conference as we come together in person at long last to have critical conversations about the status of women and girls around the world. It is particularly appropriate that our conversations today, in keeping with the mission of the City Bar, are focused on how laws and policies affect the status of women and girls around the world. The City Bar has long been deeply committed to the rights of women in the profession and gender equality, or I should say equity as well, here at home, but also the empowerment and equality and equity of all women and girls around the globe. We have so much to celebrate with women standing up for the rights of women and girls around the world. But we also know well, all too well, it is a precarious and challenging time for women and girls around the world. We are all watching in horror about the ongoing war in the Ukraine. And sadly, women and girls who are at risk in so many other parts of the world, from Afghanistan, Iran, Ethiopia, Sudan, so many places. We stand with them. But more importantly, as so many of the honorees and incredible panelists you are going to hear from tonight have exemplified, we must act to find solutions. This conference shines a very necessary light on the issues women and girls around the world face and what we can do to take action and see progress. As the Honorable Pramila Patten, Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence and Conflict, who we will honor shortly, said so well, we must rise to the challenge of our times. Inaction is not an option. Each of the panels you are going to hear raise such critical issues. You will hear tonight about eliminating violence against women and girls by pursuing justice for those who have been victims of grave atrocities in conflict zones and modern-day genocides. To put that in context, UN Undersecretary General and UN Women Executive Director Ms. Sima Bahous reported yesterday that women and children are 90% of the nearly 8 million Ukrainians that have been forced to move to other countries. Women and girls are 68% of the millions displaced within Ukraine. nearly unthinkable for us in the comfort of New York City. You will hear tonight about the need to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change and environmental and disaster risk reduction. Again, for context, it has been reported that climate change and environmental degradation exacerbate the risks of violence against women and girls due to displacement, resource scarcity, and food insecurity. Just by way of example, in Puerto Rico, it was reported that following Hurricane Maria in 2017, there was a 62% increase in requests for survivor-related services. In Ethiopia, there was an increase of girls sold into early marriage in exchange for livestock to help families cope with prolonged drought. And Nepal witnessed trafficking increase dramatically to 12 to 20,000 per year after the earthquake. And finally, you will hear tonight about achieving gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in the digital age, a really important topic. The role of technology has created crises in the Afghan, Ukrainian, and Iranian legal communities and has been used to intimidate members of the judiciary. As Undersecretary General Bahu stated in her opening statement earlier this week, the digital revolution presents unprecedented opportunities, but also profound challenges. Some of the data she highlighted includes women are 18% less likely than men to own a smartphone. This past year alone, 259 million more men than women were online. And this digital divide is, of course, more acute for those women and girls with low literacy or low income, those living in remote areas, and of course, migrants. Research has shown that 80% of children in 25 countries, 80% of children in 25 countries reported feeling in danger of sexual abuse and exploitation when online. Afghan women who spoke out on YouTube by blogging had their doors marked by the Taliban. As UN Undersecretary General Bahu said, technology should liberate, not aggravate, violence with online behaviors that seek to control, harm, silence, or discredit the voices of women and girls. So I could not be more proud that the City Bar is home to this International Conference on Women. The City Bar is an organization of over 23,000 members, predominantly in New York, but with many members around the country and the globe. This year, as many of you know, our Vance Center for International Justice is celebrating its 20th anniversary. Their Women in the Profession program promotes improved opportunities and conditions for women lawyers and uses the practice of law to enhance the status of women in general and ensure women equal protection under the law. Our City Bar committees and task forces are focused on the very issues we are discussing today. As recently as last week, the City Bar joined a letter from the Coalition for the Endangered Lawyer to the UN Special Rapporteur, urging immediate intervention on behalf of Riza Khandan, a human rights activist in Iran. Khandan is married to Nasrin Sotoudeh, a prominent human rights and women's rights activist who has been outspoken against the mandatory hijab laws. In apparent retaliation for his wife's continued activism on behalf of women's rights, Khandan has been summoned to prison, purportedly to serve a sentence related to his human rights activism that authorities have until now expressed absolutely no interest in enforcing. The letter urges Iranian authorities to rescind the summons, drop all charges against Reza Khandan and Nasrin Sotoudeh, and to, quote, stop persecuting them for their efforts to protect, among other things, women from discrimination and humiliation to which they are subjected in contravention of the principle of civilization enshrined in Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was ratified by Iran in 1948. That says, quote, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. We've set up a task force on digital technologies, bringing together a wide range of stakeholders who, along with other relevant committees, are addressing, among other things, the fallout from the digital divide. As I mentioned, the City Bar does its work through its 150 committees and task forces, and today's conference is in no small measure a testament to the power of the work of our committees. So today, on International Women's Day, we celebrate not only those we are going to honor this evening, who stand up for women and hold the world to account, but we celebrate and thank our organizers of this evening's event. An enormous thank you to our two sponsoring committees, the United Nations Committee, co-chaired by Sofia Murashkovsky, Irvin Nina, and Catherine Van Kampen, as well as the African Affairs Committee, co-chaired by Scott Kaplan and Doris Touyu. And thank you as well to Epic Class Action Services and Huntington National Bank for your financial support of the conference. Not to mention Bernstein Litowitz and the many other generous sponsors and co-sponsors. And as one small additional thank you, I have had only a very small glimpse into the incredible hard work and dedication of Catherine Van Kampen. She has brought us together this evening with our distinguished panelists, our incredible honorees, all of you. So really a very special thank you to Catherine for all you have done to make this conference a success. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Katie Sinderson, a partner at Bernstein Litowitz, to formally open the conference. I am honored to stand tall with all of you as together we stand up for women and girls around the globe and hold the world to account. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you all. My name is Katie Sinderson. I'm a partner at Bernstein Litowitz, Berger & Grossman, and co-chair of our firm's Women's Forum. My firm is a proud co-sponsor of the 2023 International Law Conference on the Status of Women, which it has sponsored together with Epic and Huntington Bank since 2020. Reflecting the importance of this conference is also co-sponsored by the American Bar Association, the New York State Bar Association, and the New Jersey State Bar Association. We hope that tonight inspires you all to become even more engaged and to find a home with a bar association that suits you best. This conference will honor the women who make our world a safer, more secure place. We appreciate having with us Rwandan genocide survivor, human rights defender, and author of Tested to the Limit, Console Nishimwe, to do the dedication of the conference, and also to have Ukrainian musicians and sisters Oksana Telepko and Halia Leskev to perform this evening. We are thrilled to have a stellar lineup of women who are luminaries in their field to speak with us today. This conference and the recognition of the work of our panelists is more timely than ever. The rights of women and girls that some of us previously took for granted are being stripped away from women across this country and around the world. We dedicate today to the women and girls of Afghanistan who should be in school but aren't, the Iranian girls who should be free to be in public without a certain headdress but cannot, and Ukrainian women who should be at home with their families but aren't. We also remember women in other parts of the world facing tremendous violence due to wars and armed conflict who have been forced to flee their homes. While we are honored to co-host this conference, we cannot overlook that here in the US, courts and legislatures are being used today to methodically strip rights away that have been long established. One need look no further than the Supreme Court, which in June 2020 overruled Roe v. Wade and Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. The decision made it possible for the first time in almost 50 years for US states to outright ban abortions, with no exceptions left for survivors of rape or incest, little to no room to care for the health of people whose lives might be threatened by a pet pregnancy, and zero protections for anyone who simply does not want to become a parent. And of course, a wave of total abortion bans followed the Dobbs decision. As of today, according to the Guttmacher Institute, 12 states have a total ban on abortion. The impact of these laws fall hardest on people who already face enormous hurdles to receiving health care: Black, Indigenous, other people of color, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, undocumented people, and people who are living in poverty. The overturning of Roe has and will have a profound effect on abortion rights and access in the United States and the lives of American people. But we also cannot ignore that it may fuel greater efforts to undermine gender equity globally. In 1973, Roe v. Wade was a landmark decision establishing constitutional abortion protections. Since then, it has been cited often in jurisprudence around the world, liberalizing the rights to abortion. But as the dissenting justices in Dobbs recognized, in light of that worldwide liberalization of abortion laws, it is American states that will become international outliers after today. One final note regarding an increasingly hostile legal landscape. We must recognize the unique struggle of trans women and girls, and again, that the law is being used in our country and around the world to target these vulnerable individuals. It is no coincidence that many of the same regimes stripping away legal protections for reproductive health care are also attacking the rights of trans people to seek gender-affirming care and are requiring women and girls to prove their gender to state authorities. The same principles of self-determination and bodily autonomy, principles that we are here today to discuss, are under assault. Today's conference will address some of these issues and many others. The program consists of 3 panels, which will focus on separate legal and policy issues confronting women around the world. Our first panel will follow up on the United Nations Commission of the Status of Women's 2021 theme, Violence Against Women, Ending Impunity and the Global Pursuit of Justice. This panel is going to focus on the engagement of survivors of atrocities in conflict zones in the process of justice, and the use of universal jurisdiction to convict the perpetrators of the most serious international crimes. The second panel, Women's Empowerment Through Safety and Security, Mitigating Risks Against Climate Change and Environmental Disaster, will explore the United Nations Commission of the Status of Women's 2022 theme of addressing gender equality in the context of climate change. Our third and final panel is focused on the age of technology, empowering women and girls in this technological age, providing security for vulnerable and targeted communities. This will focus on the digital revolution as it relates to improving women and girls' lives, but also the downside of technology to intimidate, harass, and harm private persons, public servants, and members of the judiciary. I thank you for your time. I look forward so much to today's panels. Now, I would like to welcome Consale Nishimwe to the stage to present this year's conference's dedication.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm truly honored to be here today. Thank you very much for having me. So, good evening, Your Excellency, Your Honors, distinguished speakers, panelists, moderators, and honorees. My name is Console Nishimwe, women's rights advocate and author of Tested to the Limit. As a survivor of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, I am so honored to dedicate this year's conference to the work of Her Excellency Pramila Patten. Am I pronouncing well? Yeah, so the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, who oversees the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict. 6 years ago, Secretary General Antonio Guterres appointed Pramila Patten of Mauritius as his special representative on sexual violence in conflict at the level of Undersecretary General. He could not have chosen a better attorney and advocate for the job. Ms. Patten, a practicing barrister at law, served since 2003 as a member of the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. She brought solid and diversified judicial expertise in sexual and gender-based violence, as well as in women, peace and security issues to her role as Undersecretary General. Since Her Excellency's appointment, Undersecretary General Patten has given a voice to the voiceless on a global scale. She and her staff work tirelessly to help governments and policy makers around the globe understand how sexual violence is used as a modern day and ever-growing ubiquitous tactic of war and terrorism. Undersecretary General Patten has bravely spoken out for the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan, the Central African Republic, Colombia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Mali, Myanmar, Rwanda, Somalia, South Sudan, the Syria Arab Republic, Yemen, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Cote d'Ivoire, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, and many other places. She has said, throughout history, human progress has been interrupted by plagues, wars, and authoritarian rule. Issues we thought had been consigned to the ash heap of history remain in our daily headlines. We cannot choose the times we live in. We can only choose how we respond. We must not rest until every survivor, every civilian can sleep under the cover of justice. There is no place in a modern world for gender apartheid, for strong men in a place of strong institutions, or for medieval wars of looting, pillage, and rape. Women's rights are not Western rights. They are human rights, and they are universal in times of war and peace. Prevention is the best form of protection, including the prevention of conflict itself. We must rise to the challenge of our times. Inaction is not an option. Special Representative Patten has courageously advocated for the rights of children born of sexual violence to be given what is their human right, the human right to have a name, a birth certificate, and the right of mothers who have born children of rape to keep their children, even when their own communities shun both them and their children. She has also championed compensation for survivors of sexual violence so that society also contributes to the burden each survivor bears. Yazidi women and others enslaved by ISIS greatly appreciate her office support. Special Representative Patten understands that while the COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged our world for the past 3 years, a silent pandemic of violence against women and girls is also raging. Almost 1 in 3 women and girls have been subjected to physical and or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both, at least in their life. Because of her work, we understand that globally, violence against women disproportionately affects low and lower middle income countries and regions. Globally, 81,000, around 47,000 of them, 58%, died at the hands of an intimate partner or a family member. Emerging data collected by the UN Women through rapid gender assessments on the impact of COVID-19 on violence against women confirm shadow pandemic, and big data analysis in 8 Asian countries shows against women and help seeking those significantly during COVID-19 lockdowns. Make no mistake, violence against women results in significant costs of government to victims, survivors, and communities. Costs are both direct and indirect, and tangible and intangible. These costs are borne by every one of us, including individual victims, survivors, perpetrators, the government, and society in general. And the new phenomenon in the digital age is the now widely pervasive cyber harassment and exploitation of women and girls, a new type of sexual terrorism, if you will. 1 in 10 women in the European Union report having experienced cyber harassment since the age of 15. 90% of the victims of cyber harassment and exploitation are women and girls. 70% of the victims of human trafficking, which in the digital age can be linked to cyber exploitation, are women and girls. One of our greatest fears should be that digital violence, which often translates into the real world violence, will become ubiquitous in the same way that the gun violence has, and will become so intractable, a problem that regulators and politicians will fail to effectively tackle it. History teaches us that women and girls have always been the spoils of war and armed conflict. In fact, women and girls are the ultimate prize of war, armed conflict. Since Russians increased military aggression against the Ukraine, there are credible, well-documented reports of sexual violence and rape against Ukrainian women by Russian forces and the forces, abduction and intronation of their children against Ukrainian motherland. Perhaps no other official on earth understands what sexual violence does to women and girls by hollowing them out from the inside with a burden they physically and psychologically carry for their entire lives. And virtually no one of the perpetrators of such violence face criminal charges or punished for their violent criminal acts. Violence against women and girls manifests itself in many ways, including intimate partner and honor killings and female genital mutilation. Perhaps most widespread of all is the killing of female before they are even born. There is a Chinese saying that women hold up half of the sky, and yet millions of our sisters are missing from this earth due to femicide. The state of world population 2020 report indicates that the number of missing women has more than doubled over the past 50 years, rising from 60 million in 1970 to an estimated 142.6 million in 2020. The phrase missing women refers to those whose numbers are reflected in 6 racial imbalances at birth as a result of gender-biased sex selection, combined with excess female mortality stemming from postnatal sex selection. Many girls are never born simply because they are female. Think of the implications for our world of the future talent we have lost because of female are simply not even born. Undersecretary General, today we wish to honor and celebrate you. We thank you for your extraordinary work in the areas of the safety and security of women and girls. We are delighted that for the 4th year in a row, you have agreed to attend this event. We are so grateful for your presence because you have helped grow the importance of this event. Your Excellency, last year we told you that you have an open invitation from the New York City Bar Association, including me, the New York City State Bar Association, and the American Bar Association, and many more bar associations around the world to partner and collaborate with us and Your Excellency's office. Please consider us your partners in justice. For the safety and the security of all women and girls, let's continue to take this journey together to strengthen the female collective and raise humanity together. Without further ado, please welcome Secretary General Pramila Patten. Thank you.
Good evening, the President of the New York City Bar, distinguished members of the New York City Bar, dear honorees, panelists, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real honor to accept this award from the New York City Bar Association on behalf of the United Nations Mandate on Sexual Violence in Conflict. As Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, and as a woman lawyer myself, it is all the more special coming from the Bar Association of the host city of the United Nations, which has done so much to welcome me during my tenure in office and to advance the rule of law for women and girls, both locally and globally. I view this not simply as an award for my past work, but as a challenge to do more to support every survivor of sexual violence in conflict and to prevent and end this scourge once and for all. We gather here today on International Women's Day at a time when both multilateralism and the rule of law are under profound threat. When the might makes right logic of war replaces the rule of law, it is women and girls who suffer most. I returned from Lviv on Monday evening, Ukraine, where experts gathered 1 year after the full-scale invasion of that country to discuss justice in the context of an active war zone where the United Nations has verified incidents and patterns of sexual violence committed against women and girls, ranging in age from 4 to 84 years old. On Saturday, I met with the First Lady of Ukraine, who shared with me the case of a 12-year-old who had been brutally gang raped and was pregnant. On Sunday morning, during a bilateral meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister, she showed me the picture of a 4-year-old who was also brutally raped and was in a sanatorium. My message during that conference, United for Justice, was clear. There can be no impunity for sexual violence in conflict, regardless of the rank or affiliation of the perpetrator. And I told the president of Ukraine during a meeting on Friday evening that last year I was in Ukraine in May, and I urged survivors to break the silence and to denounce the perpetrators. And I told survivors that their silence will be the license of the perpetrators to rape them. And that this year I came with a new message to the survivors that international law will not be an empty promise, and I pledged justice to them. Over the past year, my mandate has been active in numerous conflict and post-conflict contexts, supporting efforts to advance accountability. In Guinea, in West Africa, we saw the opening of a domestic trial for a former head of state for sexual violence committed against over 125 women and girls during an attack on peaceful demonstrators who gathered in the stadium in the capital, Conakry, on 28th of September 2009. That trial took 13 years to begin, but no survivor lost their thirst for justice. My mandate, through my team of experts on the rule of law and sexual violence in conflict, has supported the relevant authorities from the beginning of the trial and will remain engaged even beyond its conclusion to continue supporting the victims and witnesses. The public broadcast of this trial has riveted the nation, sending a powerful message to perpetrators everywhere that sexual violence will be prosecuted and that women are the holders of rights that will be respected and enforced. Over the past year, beyond Ukraine and Guinea, my mandate has deployed in the Central African Republic, Libya, Mali, South Sudan, Sudan, to strengthen institutional safeguards against impunity for wartime sexual violence. In the DRC, we are working with the government to establish a national reparations fund for victims of sexual violence to help rebuild shattered lives and livelihoods. Next week, I will visit Colombia at the invitation of the government to support the transitional justice process and the implementation of the gender provisions of Colombia's landmark peace agreement. My mandate is also engaged in Iraq, Nigeria, and elsewhere to pursue accountability for conflict-related sexual violence, including in the context of counterterrorism trials. Ladies and gentlemen, the geographical scope of the annual report of the Secretary General on conflict-related sexual violence, which is compiled by my office, continues to expand. This year, it will cover more than 20 country situations where sexual violence is used as a tactic of war, torture, terror, and political repression. As the UN Secretary General Guterres has stated, the world is too small for so many hotspots. Accordingly, my mandate cannot simply be reactive. And that is why in September of last year, I launched a framework for the prevention of conflict-related sexual violence, which aims to address the structural drivers of sexual violence, such as gender discrimination, as well as to guide operations in the field. There have also been important legal and policy developments here in the United States to enhance the global fight against conflict-related sexual violence. In November 2022, US President Biden issued a presidential memorandum to promote accountability for conflict-related sexual violence that directs the United States executive branch to support survivors through all available measures, including legal, policy, diplomatic, and financial tools to deter sexual violence in conflict, as well as increasing support to my office. The United States Congress also enacted on a bipartisan basis the Justice for Victims of War Crimes Act at the end of 2022, which provides a basis for the prosecution of perpetrators of war crimes who enter the United States, regardless of their nationality or that of the victim. I count on you, members of the bar associations assembled here, to ensure that these laws and policies are fully realized, to ensure that survivors receive the support and access to justice they deserve, and that perpetrators have no safe haven or hiding place. The United Nations Charter was drafted to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to ensure the equal rights of men and women. In accepting this award, I commit to redoubling my efforts to ensure that every woman and girl is safe from conflict, most intimate and enduring atrocity, the scourge of wartime rape, and to ensure that they have equal access to justice. Thank you.
So first panel, we're up.
I'm gonna do this.
You can stand up. Okay. Let's just sit here. Should we sit on this side as well? Yeah, either side. I will come close to you.
While the first panel is getting settled, I would ask all of you to please silence your phones so that we can have a productive panel discussion.
Wonderful.
So for our first panel is Violence Against Women, Ending Impunity and the Global Pursuit of Justice. I am one of your moderators, Mirna Martinez Santiago, with Catherine Van Kappen. And our panelists this evening are Dia Basu Sen, Anna Mercado Clark, Nancy Genova, Kavita Mehra, Natia Navruzov, and Hope Rickelman. So let's get right into it. When we think about violence against women, we of course think about physical violence, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and or exploitation. But of course, we know that violence can take many other forms. Depriving women of choice and reducing them to objects with no agency over their own futures or their bodies is a form of violence. We are seeing this around the globe and even here in our own country. For instance, in Afghanistan, the Taliban took control in 2021. In less than 2 years, they have abolished the Ministry of Women's Affairs, eliminating women's right to political participation and engagement. They have also passed laws prohibiting girls from attending school past 6th grade, and there is current talk of prohibiting girls from going to school at all. Women are barred from working in most industries outside of the home. In May 2022, the Taliban passed a law requiring all women to cover their faces in public. They cannot travel without a male chaperone. Women-led households have, as a result, fallen immediately into abject poverty. As of January 2023, it was reported that the Taliban issued a mandate saying that women may no longer be seen by male doctors. With women no longer being allowed to obtain an education past 6th grade, within a generation, a single generation, women in Afghanistan will not be able to get either routine or life-saving care. They are, in essence, being condemned to a life of only childbearing or sexual exploitation. So with that said, what can we do to help women in places like Afghanistan who are living with unimaginable, nightmarish violence? So Dia, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me today. So I'm Dia Basu Sen, and I'm the Executive Director of SUPNA NYC. We work with South Asian immigrant women and families, working around addressing health inequities, empowering women, and building community power. So I think what's really important is to remember how violence against women takes so many forms. And oftentimes, the smallest forms are what kind of aggregates and builds up to become kind of the larger things. So when we normalize the small levels of violence in our communities, we see that then growing and impacting in larger ways. So a lot of the women we work with don't have autonomy in the home. They aren't able to make those choices. They aren't able to choose whether or not they want to go to school, whether or not or who they marry, at what age they marry. They are often relegated completely to the home. So that the whole world that is outside is completely foreign to them. So I think when we talk about what we can do for us as our organization, as the work that we do, it's about actually kind of disrupting these systems to create pathways for these women, to give them information, to give them options and choices. Not to tell them what to do, but to give them agency and knowledge about what resources are outside to help them. So for us, one of the kind of most radical ways we see that we can help is actually creating space that centers women, because so often in any country, even our own, right, women don't really have a space that is their own. And so for us, it's creating a space for women by women that actually centers their needs first above everything else. And I think one of the things that, as I was thinking about what I wanted to say last night, I received an email from a colleague, and there was a quote in it that said, "The pursuit of justice can be healing, but the singular pursuit of justice in and of itself is not the same as the pursuit of healing." So I think for us, the work that we do is not just trying to pursue justice, not just trying to create those choices for women, but also actually pursuing healing for these women, right? Giving them the legal services, but then also giving them the mental health services or the space for them to actually heal from the traumas that they've been in.
Thank you, Dia. So, Anna Mercado Clark, the next question is going to be for you. So we're kind of looking outside and pointing towards other countries like Iran and Afghanistan, but we have been seeing our own rollbacks of rights here in the United States. In fact, less than a year ago, Roe versus Wade was the law of the land. And as you've heard several times during the day, during this evening's programs already, we are now seeing more and more states that are passing total abortion bans, and those that aren't passing total abortion bans are passing extremely limited abortion laws. So what can we do, while we're also trying to help women in those other countries work towards codifying the rights here in the United States so that we can continue to have bodily autonomy?
And thank you for having me this evening. It's so interesting. So I'm the president-elect of the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. It is the umbrella organization for all Asian American bars around the country. And I think the one thing that I want to emphasize here is that there's a lot of intersectionality when we think about our role as women. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're siblings. We are people who are looked upon to keep things together. We can be members of the LGBTQ community. We can be members of the Asian American community and other communities. And at NAPABA, we strive to make sure that we are pursuing this intersectionality, not only allowing space for people to be supported, but also we try to advocate both at the state level and the federal level for laws that will protect women and individuals whose rights are being threatened right now. So we talk about the impact of the Dobbs decision. And there are a lot of laws. Almost half of the states in this country have laws that restrict the right of women, restrict reproductive rights for women. We also have rights that are limiting transgender rights as well. Our convention this year is actually scheduled to take place in Indianapolis. And it's been a struggle. We have a faction of our organization. We represent the interests of 60,000 AAPI individuals in the United States. We have 90 affiliates around the country. And there is a faction of our organization that thinks we should not go to a place like Indianapolis or Indiana, that passed laws recently, both restricting reproductive rights as well as prohibiting transgender individuals from participating in high school girls' sports. Our decision, the board's decision, was to stay in Indianapolis, particularly because these are the spaces that we need to be in. These are the spaces where we need to advocate, where we need to have a presence, where we show up for our people who live and work in these places. We can't simply have the conversation in places where we know people already support our thoughts and what we think and how we view rights. We have to live in these spaces. So we're actually gearing up for a year-long and beyond program to advocate in this space. So we have an annual lobby day that is taking place in May of this year in DC. I encourage everyone to check it out and please join us, where we meet with our legislators to advocate for certain laws that we take issue with, that we think is not fair, that we think are restricting the rights of our people. And you don't have to be AAPI to participate, because all of these issues impact not just the AAPI community, but all of us. We also are now planning a state lobby day so that we can help the community, the local community in Indiana, to advocate. We're also planning some other programming to provide legal support, pro bono legal services for people who are impacted by these laws that are restricting our reproductive rights. I will also just add, there's another set of laws that are seeking to restrict the right of individuals who originate from certain countries, particularly right now it's China. This is very reminiscent of the laws restricting certain Chinese property ownership rights in the 1800s. That are now gaining traction. Texas is a hotbed for this. And when I talk about intersectionality, these are things that impact all of us, but in particular women. Women who typically have less resources, are underrepresented in these spaces, and are not known or not necessarily encouraged to speak up and take up space. So I encourage all of you to do that in your own communities, but also please join us.
Thank you, Anna. So for those of you who may not know, I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Girls Rule the Law. And we have one core mission, and that's to introduce middle and high school girls to the law, which is the legislature, the judiciary, and the legal field. And part of the reason we do that is that we believe that representation is key to making change. I believe that women, if we're not at the highest level of government, in the judiciary, making the laws that impact us and impact our lived experiences, then we cannot drive change. We can't expect other people to make those changes for us. So Nancy Genova, with that said, what can we do to drive representation at the highest levels of our government and in our world, really, so that women's rights become, synonymous to human rights?
Right. So I'm the president emerita of the 100 Hispanic Women, and I served there 4 terms, 8 years. One of the things that we do is we have educational programs and scholarships for Latinas in our community. The reason that we do that is because you need high level of education, right? Mm-hmm. To be able then to mobilize and make the changes. This is how we all connect the threads. Mm-hmm. And so passing the law is not enough. Although it's a labor-intensive process, it's the implementation of that law that actually creates the change in the community. Mm-hmm. Creating the law is like the second step in, right? First, you identify the issue, then you create the law, and then you actually begin to implement it. But every time we try to implement laws that benefit women, okay, we always come to a standstill. And so what we have to do, the incredible news is that we're incredibly resilient, right? Because even though we've been oppressed, we've been underpaid, even though we are targeted and we are abused, we are here and we outlive men. So that being said, I would say that it's that you want to mobilize them to be able to serve, but you also want to infuse them with enough power so that their party does not control their implementation.
Thank you so much. Catherine?
Oh my gosh, Myrna, you are a hard act to follow. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and so that's why Victoria and Robin bought everyone brownies and cookies. So help yourselves to any refreshments, and also just feel free to use the restroom as you need. But this is a lightning lightning round that we're doing tonight. 3 panels and an awards, and we have the Ukrainian musicians who studied at the conservatory in Kyiv, the beautiful sisters. Where are they? There they are. Yes, please stand. Yes. Okay. So as Myrna and I discussed in preparation for this panel, violence against women and girls is a sliding scale. When there's progress in the fight against it, there is also a backlash. And it can be that the more we fight against a culture of violence, the violence can actually intensify. For example, this month, and Judge Ridgway, thank you for this, this month marks the 6th anniversary of Masha Amina's arrest by the Iranian morality police for improperly wearing her headdress. According to her family and local media, Masha was severely beaten and died at the hands of police. After reports of her death emerged, protests erupted across Iran. They were led by women who tore off their hijabs, cut their hair, and adopted a rallying cry of women, life, and freedom. These women and their supporters have also been beaten, jailed, and killed. Masha's resistance and the price she paid for it have galvanized a generation calling for change. Such events can be the catalyst for cultural change, calls for real action, and even ignite revolutions. To that end, what steps is your organization taking in your work to end violence in your communities, to end impunity for perpetrators, and to pursue justice for victims and survivors? Please, each of you, answer these questions being mindful of the time, since we're, of course, running late, and the need for others to speak. So, Natia, I would please also, I'm happy to introduce you. You are such a superstar, but also introduce yourself if you'd like. And thank you for being here. We're so honored with all of you.
I didn't know I was a superstar. Thank you,
You
Catherine.
are. You all are.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Natia Navruzov. I'm a Yazidi. I was born in Georgia and I studied in France, qualifying as a lawyer. And I'm actually based in New York right now, doing a human rights fellowship at Columbia University.
She's also an Obama fellow, and she was hanging out with Amal Clooney this afternoon. So, good. Okay, go ahead, continue.
Thank you. So it's a very important day for me because as a Yazidi woman and also a lawyer, this topic is very close to my heart. When the Yazidi genocide started in August 2014, I was in France with my family and I was 22 years old. I remember very vividly that day. I think like many of us remember what we were doing on the during the 9/11 attacks. Every Yazidi remembers the 3rd of August 2014. So I was basically preparing to pass the French bar exam, and suddenly my mom started to shout and in front of the television to cry, and I thought, what is happening? And then I just heard Yazidis, and I was very surprised because journalists usually were not talking about us. We're a very small community, not known, and kind of everywhere in the world. So, we started to see those horrible images of Sinjar being attacked, the homeland of the Yazidis in Iraq, especially thousands of people being trapped on Sinjar mountain, surrounded by ISIS and without food and water. And on that day, I knew that I wouldn't become an international arbitration lawyer. So, I finished studying and I basically in 2018 moved to Iraq for 4 years, joining an NGO called Yazda. And Yazda was established 3 weeks after the start of the genocide and provided and is still providing humanitarian and advocacy support to Yazidi survivors, and we have supported thousands of them. My work joining Yazda was to lead a documentation project. So this project is about collecting information through survivors' testimonies and documenting crime scenes and making sure that, first of all, what happened is not forgotten, because Yazidis, we have a long history of persecution, and my ancestors were subjected to genocide, but I just have no information available on that. The second reason why we started this project is, to pursue justice. And this is something that we started to do very, very early on. And unfortunately, as you might know, Iraq currently doesn't have a legal framework to criminalize the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. So Iraq, which is the country where, the crimes happened, where most of the survivors are, and where most of the perpetrators were captured, doesn't have a legal framework to prosecute. So what we ended up doing is that, we looked around, what is the other solution? Okay, ICC doesn't want to do this case. The international community doesn't want to create, a hybrid tribunal or international tribunal. So the only legal avenue that we were able to pursue and that we are still pursuing right now are universal jurisdiction cases. So those cases that are so grave that, most of the countries accept to prosecute them regardless of the link with the country. So we were successful in Germany mainly, and 2 years ago, I'm proud to say that we were able to support the first genocide conviction of an ISIS member. And the only witness in this case is a mother who saw her daughter die in front of her eyes and who testified in a country she had never been, surrounded by people speaking in a language she had never heard, but being brave enough to stand there and getting that conviction. Since then, we had several other cases, but we're looking for other avenues. And then lastly, another big part of the work we were doing is push for the Yazidi survivors law to pass. And Your Excellency, I know you have done a lot of work around this. So this law is a law that is meant to provide reparations to survivors. And unfortunately, when it came out, it seemed that no survivors were consulted, right? Like no one knew about the law. And what we did, and I worked a lot with survivors, is that we trained them on transitional justice and reparation to make sure they understand their rights. And then they campaigned until the law was passed 2 years ago. I think I'm going to stop here. So that
Thank you so much. And so all of you have a home at the New York City bar. Hope Rickelman is from Amsterdam.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
Extremely humbled to be here with everybody. Obviously, my name is Hope Rickelman. I am the director of Yazidi Legal Network. We support Yazidis. I don't think I have to explain the situation that they are in. I'm also the head of the Nuhanovich Foundation, Iraq and Syria projects. And what we do is we take a very holistic approach to supporting survivors of international crimes in the Netherlands. We look at strategic litigation from a civil and a criminal perspective. But most importantly, we really take the approach of the community first. So empowering them to be able to voice their needs, to explain to us what their needs are. If this is mental health support, we can refer them to the right institutes. We also have very amazing connections with the Genocide and Holocaust Institute in the Netherlands in Amsterdam. So sometimes survivors, they can tell their stories there, journalists. So it really is a network of supporting the community and the needs that they have. I'll keep it short, but there are a few things that I'm very proud of. One of the things that we did for the Yazidis was lobbied the Dutch government to acknowledge the genocide formally, which was successful. We did that last year. And also very proud to say that this year we have a Yazidi case pending before Dutch courts yeah. And we're supporting this on multiple levels, but yeah, I think those are the main things that I'm extremely proud of that we've done the past year.
So, like I said, this is a lightning round, but I want all of you to feel free to connect with our speakers either later tonight or follow up via email through LinkedIn. Kavita, I want to talk to you. The work that you do at your organization is very difficult. And I would like you, if you don't mind, to spend a little time talking about the work that you do, but also the toll that it takes on yourself and your staff, and how do you keep going in doing the work that we all need to do that's so important and is certainly not easy?
That feels like a tremendously hard question. This also feels like the moment of an award ceremony where the music is playing. And they're like, is she going to get off the stage?
Your award is here, so you got it.
I have deeply appreciated this conversation, largely because it offers the opportunity for us to have a global perspective as well as a local perspective. And where I come tonight is to really show the local perspective. I work at an organization called Saki for South Asian Women. I want to shout out my colleagues over there who are amazing in being here. Thank you. And deeply appreciate the question about how are we thinking about the work and how it's impacting us? But what I want to sort of frame out right now is where we stand in this country around gender-based violence, because as we talk about the global, there is a national crisis that's happening here. Across the country, there's been an 8% increase of DV, domestic violence cases, in the last year alone. That's a tremendous increase. At Saki, we have seen a 65% increase in cases in 1 year. If we were a corporation and we talked about the 65% growth of our company, people would stop us in our seats and they would ask us what we're doing and how we're making so much money. But what we see at Saki is that there is an incredible demand in the community for the work that we do. 48% of South Asian Americans have identified and indicated that they have experienced gender-based violence through the course of their lifetime. I am talking about the fastest growing immigrant community in New York City. Nearly 50% of them have experienced gender-based violence in their lifetime. So what we see here at Seki is that there is a demand for our work like we have never seen before, and we are responding accordingly. We've been doing this work in the community for 34 years. We work with survivors starting at the age of 6 until the very elderly. Just take that in for a second. Here in New York City, we are working with the survivors starting at the age of 6. We don't talk about this work in our community. We don't talk about it in our backyard, but it is happening here, and it is happening across all communities. Where I want to just close out, though, is my sense of hope. What COVID has taught us is that there is a rise of violence, but there is a rise of mobilization happening. We feel this energy across our team, and we feel this across the movement. National movements have started, coalitions have started. Power is galvanizing, because what we know is that unless people are mobilizing and really activating around the issue of gender-based violence, nothing is going to change.
Thank you very much. So we're going to hop off for 1 minute, but I would love it if you answered my other question, which is because burnout is real.
It is.
And compassion fatigue is a real thing. And we all get tired. And so how do you keep going?
So there's a reason I avoided that question.
You're tired and you don't know.
No, we talk about vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and burnout a lot at our organization. We have taken a strong attempt to work to create a space where our team feels supported. It's the conversation that we're constantly having. I don't know of an institution, though, for-profit or nonprofit, that isn't talking about burnout, vicarious trauma, or fatigue in some capacity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. What I will tell you is something I heard during COVID, and that is you constantly, when you're doing this work, you constantly have to replenish yourself. And if you are a cup, fill up your cup and make sure that the saucer is full, because it's that cup and it's the full saucer that is going to give you enough energy to keep doing this work. And the other thing that I learned was on a Zoom conference with our partners during COVID, we would kind of huddle every once in a while. Rebecca's here and Katie said, and Rebecca was always wonderful about bringing everyone together, but Katie said one night, be kind to yourself. And I was like, what? Is that a thing? Be kind to yourself. But yes, be kind to yourselves. And with that, panel 2, you are up. I have an envelope for you. Okay. I do.
That's the wrong one. We have some
I know. Should I pass it again? Hi. Your Honor. If anyone else has.
Oh my gosh. I should have known.
Martha's not here, yeah.
Somebody more. It's gonna be
Patricia?
written comments.
I don't.
I'll probably get it somewhere.
Well, either way, it's gonna say Martha.
Oh, thank you.
I don't have a dark marker.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second panel, Women's Empowerment Through Safety and Security, Mitigating Risks Against Climate Change and Environmental Disaster. I'm Judge Delisa Ridgway of the U.S. Court of International Trade. I don't have my gavel with me, or a cocktail glass that I can tinkle, both of which generally work. If we could have quiet, please, I'd appreciate it. Welcome to the second panel. I'm Judge Delisa Ridgway and of the Court of International Trade, and together with my colleague Abiola, we're going to be moderating this session. To be sure, all of the topics that we're discussing this evening have profound implications for women and girls of the world, but climate change truly is in a class by itself. To put it bluntly, if we don't get this right, nothing else matters. This is true even for the world's population as a whole, but it's particularly true for women. The climate crisis is definitely not gender neutral. It's women and children and vulnerable, marginalized populations who by far suffer the greatest as a result of climate change and environmental disaster. In concrete terms, what exactly does that mean? Tonight, we're privileged to have with us 4 expert voices to help illuminate that intersection for us from a range of different perspectives. As we will hear, just as women are most impacted by climate change, so too women are key to the response. Let me give you just a few facts and figures. An oft-cited 2019 study concluded that increasing women's representation in national parliaments leads to the adoption of more stringent climate change policies and results directly in lower emissions. Similarly, expanding women's access to productive resources can increase agricultural production and food security and reduce carbon dioxide emissions. For example, if all of the women who are smallholders received equal access to productive resources, their farm yields would increase by a shocking 20 to 30%. What this would mean is that between 100 and 150 million people worldwide would no longer go hungry. That's a profound impact. And in turn, increasing farm yields reduces deforestation, which in turn reduces emissions. One final example. Women in leadership roles are associated with increased transparency on the issue of climate impact. So, for example, there's a demonstrated positive correlation between higher percentages of women on corporate boards and transparency in the disclosure of data on carbon emissions. Abiola is going to kick us off and will introduce her first 2 speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening and welcome. Welcome to all dignitaries, panelists, and honorees. My name is Abiola Falaya, and I will be co-moderating today. I'm grateful to Catherine and also the organizers of this event for giving me a seat at the table to have this conversation. So as the judge mentioned, our panel discussion is entitled Women's Empowerment Through Safety and Security, Mitigating Risks Against Climate Change and Environmental Disaster. Okay, so let's get started. I'll just give you some figures here. According to a report by the UN Women, the detrimental effects of climate change can be felt in the short term through natural disasters such as landslides, floods, and hurricanes, and in the long term through more gradual degradation of the environment. The adverse effects of these events are already felt in many areas, including in relation to agriculture and food security, which is the work that I do at Bread for the World in the policy team. Biodiversity and ecosystems, water resources, human health, human settlements, and migration patterns, and energy and transport and industry. Also, let us not forget the implications of climate change for women's human rights and access to humanitarian assistance. In many of these contexts, women are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change than men, primarily as they constitute the majority of the world's poor and are more dependent for their livelihood on natural resources that are threatened by climate change. Additionally, they face social, economic, and political barriers that limit their coping capacity. So women in rural areas, I was in Ghana last year, in rural Ghana and also rural Kenya, tend to be especially vulnerable because, again, they're highly dependent on the local natural resources for their livelihood. Okay, I'm a data head, so I had to start with the report. The reason why we're here is we have a wonderful, esteemed group of women, fabulous women, with certain levels of expertise in their respective work that they do. So Patricia, good to see you. Let's get started with you. Can you tell us about some of the pressing issues facing the Native American community at the intersection of gender and climate justice? I want to put in another question if you're able to get to it, which is the role that Indigenous women have played in helping to preserve the environment in a way that is beneficial to all of us. So I think that because I didn't introduce you, it would be helpful if you're able to tell us about your organization. Thank you.
Dosha, my name is Patricia Tarrant. I am an enrolled member of the Mandan Hinata tribe of North Dakota, and I work at the American Indian Community House located here in New Jersey and New York. And one of a lot of our tribal nations are matriarchal societies. They follow the women, and a lot of them are peacekeepers. They are traditionalists. They tell us how to keep our traditions alive. And I know that it's really important. You know, during COVID, we looked to our matriarchs to tell us how to get through it. We burned sage. We smoked we burned cedar too. We we try to keep those traditions alive. And a lot of, on our reservation, there's a lot of fracking, and a lot of our oil and water is mixed. So a lot of our water sources are depleting. And it's a big problem for us.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to follow up with that because at my organization at Bread for the World, when we put on events, we always acknowledge the land on which we stand, which is most times an indigenous land. And, I'm just curious about just your thoughts on how you think we can do better as far as preserving the environment.
I just want to point out this land we're currently on is Lenape land, and we and I think even just to be more mindful and aware of what chemicals you use and the chemicals you put in your body, and then even the chemicals you use every day, like cleaning products. We can use more natural I think. Sorry, I'm very humbled. I'm very.
Merly? Hey, how are you?
My name is Merly Fuentes, Health Equity Coordinator at Sepa Mujer. I am here on behalf of Sepa Mujer's Executive Director, Martha Maffei, who unfortunately became ill before this conference. So thank you for having me today. Sepa Mujer is the only Latina immigrant rights organization on Long Island, which provides support services to victims of violence, which includes human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, and many other crimes. This organization provides not only support services and legal services to victims, but also provides a leadership component which allows victims and survivors of crimes to reintegrate into society as leaders and advocates for other women who were once victims of crimes. So when we talk about safety and security for women, we must take into account the various socioeconomic factors and social determinants of health that affect immigrant women, a population which we know is much more vulnerable to experience these types of crime, violence. So when these women in their home countries, they are accustomed to agricultural ways of living. They are accustomed to sustainable crops, to grazing livestock. And when they come to this country after experiencing extreme violence, destruction of their natural habitats, contaminated waters, exploitation of their land, and political corruption, they also come here afraid of these things that they have been experiencing over there due to language and cultural barriers, lack of access to information and resources, and fear of anti-immigrant sentiment and biases. Women who are in these environments are higher risk of being left behind and trapped in dangerous environments of drug trafficking, human trafficking, cycles which make them victims and re-victimization for a long time. Latina immigrant women are in these situations while also expected to care for their familial responsibilities, their children, and providing for their families. Something that we see on the east end of Long Island a lot is when they come to New York City, they come to the east end to work on the farmlands, to work on these occupations, which not only help them feel connected to their homes, but allow them to use the skills in which they've worked with multi-generational, right? This is something that they know and that their families know. So when they come to the farmlands, I'm sorry. They also experience inequitable wages and unstable income. They are paid much less than the minimum wage. They don't have enough financial recourse to survive in disproportionate expensive living areas such as the Hamptons and expensive areas where we know the farmlands are, which we know and love, right, on the East End. But they are working these farmlands and they are unable to afford a place to live. Most of them are forced to live in tents or tarps with mattresses on the dirt ground, what they call squalid migrant camps on the outskirts of these fancy and wealthy areas. To quote a Latino farm worker on the east end of Long Island, he says, "I work for very rich people in the Hamptons, but I can't afford somewhere to live. I am paid very little and an apartment costs too much money." These migrants are forced to live without any other means of disposal, are forced to sleep next to their own trash and litter, which negatively impacts their health and safety in this country. So they are leaving and fleeing places of fear, of corruption, of fear of displacement, and are unable to gather the resources that they need to survive sustainably in their countries, and they continue to suffer in that cycle of violence here. Latina immigrant women are able to utilize their contributions in society here. They are able to be leaders in our communities if the resources are adequately provided to them. Through ensuring participation of gender equality with diverse minority and underserved groups, we are able to mitigate security and safety risks for these populations, climate change risks, and ensure sustainable solutions for our communities.
Glenda, I'm going to turn first to you. So Glenda Testone is the executive director of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community Center. We've heard that cisgender women are uniquely vulnerable to climate change, but the population that you serve, even more specialized vulnerabilities that are even less visible, less recognized, less acknowledged, less studied than the women of the world. So could you tell us a little bit about the work of your organization and focus in particular on the intersection with climate change?
Hi, everyone. I'm sure you're sitting there like, what does this have to do with climate change? I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to talk about what I know, and that is this country and this city in particular. So I'm interpreting climate change broadly. I want to talk about the climate in our country right now. We are having this event in a country that to date, this year, has introduced 330 separate anti-LGBT pieces of legislation. This year alone, we're not even 3 months in. These bills are not about sports, they're not about bathrooms, they're not about drag performers, they are about policing gender identity and gender expression for everyone. I think the first thing I want to say to folks when we think about what we can do for the LGBT community around security and safety, and when we think about the climate that we are living in, the first best thing we can do is believe women and girls who identify as women and girls. Period. Pronouns matter. The younger generation is identifying as non-binary, and they may feel an affinity towards feminism, towards being feminine, towards being femme. They may use pronouns that are they, them. They are part of the community that we are talking about. So when we think about climate change in the more traditional sense, and we think about war and environmental disasters and large-scale displacement, we usually don't think about this country. But 40% of homeless youth across the country and in this city, even New York City, are LGBT youth. 40%. We are not 40% of the population. And the reason for that is familial rejection. The reason for that is the climate that we are living in right now. And that's why we at the center for the last 40 years strive to provide a home for the physical and mental well-being of LGBT people in this country and in this city. We do that through direct services. We do that through advocacy. We do that by providing a physical location, a safe space for people to come to get away from the external climate that they are facing, even in a city like New York. So I'm really honored to be here and honored to be part of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Glenda, for those words and for the work that you do. I actually have a trans nephew, so your words strike very, very close to home for me. And as I read the headlines every day, I thank God that he lives in Canada, where he is relatively safe, relatively being the operative word, but it's a terrifying time for sure. Last and certainly not least, we're going to hear from Sandia. And we work together in the American Bar Association International Law section, where she is a leader in the Women's Interest Network, and in that capacity has really drilled down, particularly through her work on a product called the Year in Review, which is an annual publication that, as its name suggests, takes a look back at major developments around the world on the subject of gender. And she's going to share with us some of her thoughts and what she has learned through Year in Review in particular about the intersection of gender and climate justice more generally.
Yeah, thank you, Judge Ridgway. Hopefully this
Speak directly into the microphone,
okay.
Yeah.
I think the first problem is that many people don't equate climate change and environmental issues to
I
gender
think
inequality.
try another mic or turn it on,
I will
actually.
The next panel is on technology.
We'll turn it on. Okay, I turned it on. We're good? Okay. What I was saying is that many people don't equate climate change and environmental disasters to gender inequality, but as we learned earlier, women are impacted the most by these situations because climate change is what you call a threat multiplier, meaning that it escalates already prevalent issues in situations and areas that have already conflict-ridden situations, such as, so I guess it exacerbates gender-based violence, human trafficking, child marriage. And when disaster hits, women are less likely to survive them because gender inequality doesn't allow them to have the mobility or decision-making skills or the access to relief or other aspects that people take for granted that further threatens their livelihood. And I was telling both Abiola and Judge Ridgway earlier that in areas where women and their struggles are ignored in daily life, those needs and their struggles are not even considered or helped at all during a time of crisis. And we learned about the shadow pandemic in a previous panel, which is the escalation of domestic violence during the COVID pandemic because so many people were living at home with their abusers all the time that it became such a big issue that the UN actually had to go and create policies to address these different issues. And I think the biggest thing is that we need to realize that there is a clear link between climate change, environmental disasters, and gender inequality. And as Judge Ridgway said, I do volunteer with the Women's Interest Network with the American Bar Association in the international law section. And I'm just surrounded by women who spend so much of their free time in their legal career actually advocating for these issues and trying to make a difference for problems that were previously ignored. So I guess to go back to what we were saying about being hopeful, I think education is the first step. And it's an honor to be here and humbled to be here with all of you to educate everyone on that. So thank you.
And don't be deceived by her innocent look, because she sends me an email when my article is late. And I'm like, I will get back to you in 24 hours. Yes. So, we've had somewhat of a robust conversation about the intersection of climate justice and gender. Again, very thankful to the panelists for their perspectives and really honored to be with Judge Ridgway for being at the table for this important conversation. One of the things that struck me when you were presenting the representative was something that she said, which is, I think it was, strong man cannot replace strong institutions. That just really struck me. I texted it to myself. And I think that when it comes to addressing this issue of just the challenges that women and girls face, I think that thinking on the long run is really important. Thinking about frameworks is really important. Thinking about laws, but someone also mentioned implementation is also very, very important. But also it's really important to make sure that there are women at the table. I'm freestyling right now. I'm not reading my notes. I'll give you just a quick example. My students and I were talking about disaster relief in Bangladesh, and they had a bunch of guys, dudes, well-meaning. They rebuilt, but they forgot to build a kitchen. So, I think that that's just, and, we have to eat, right? So places where we can start. Learning and talking about this and just being lighthearted about it, but also being serious when it's time to roll up our sleeves. And another is investing. I think putting our money where our mouth is. I think there's a biblical saying of where your heart is, where you put your time is where your heart is. I'm from a religious organization, but my Bible verses are always really bad. But really, and my CEO always says, Abiola, don't try it. I'm the preacher. You're just a staffer. But my point here is where we put our money, where we put our time really reflects our values and the things that matter to us. So, just really putting money into climate adaptation, technology, which is a theme of the CSW 67 this year, is really critical to really helping to level the playing field. So with that, I'm going to shut up, Judge Ridgway, and I'll leave it up to you.
So I'm going to credit Abiola for this. We've got 4 minutes left, and she suggested that we're running a tight train here. She had suggested when we were caucusing before today that perhaps we should leave people with, one final thought, whether it's a word of hope or a charge for action. And you've already spoken a little bit about hope, so maybe I'll begin with you and give Sandhya and give others just a chance to say, to think about what they would like to say. But you're all going to get the last word here before we turn over to the next panel. So Sandhya, you want to begin?
Yeah, sure. I'll just reiterate that I think education is the first step because we can't take action unless we know what the problem is. So before we even get to implementation or creating policies to address these issues, we need to know that these issues exist. But I think that's a good thing. I think all of you are here and we are learning more and we're being, I guess, proactive about learning these different issues and understanding how different climate change and disasters affect different people. So I think this is a great first step.
When we were meeting, caucusing beforehand, we all were sort of talking about the fact that the room would be full of people who were gender advocates, but that we're always surprised by how relatively few people who are gender advocates have thought about the intersection with climate change, which again is such an existential issue. So perhaps if we've done nothing else tonight, we've at least scratched the surface and piqued your curiosity.
I think one of the thoughts is awareness, to be more aware and to be a lot of, we have in Native country, we have an epidemic called missing and murdered Indigenous women, and we have more than 5,000 women missing at this current moment. And none of them are reported, and a lot of them are on the tribal land, and we're a sovereign nation, so we don't, it's different governments, we're federal. A lot of the cases aren't tried because it's a federal crime and we can't try federal crimes on reservations. So that's a big one, is just be more aware. And
thank you very much. Words of wisdom for us.
Immigrant women who understand climate change and understand the impact of environmental disasters are fighting for climate justice. We are working to protect our lands and our environments, and we are taking a leadership role in small grassroots actions, big social change advocacy efforts, and are transforming our political landscape. Through activism, leadership, and advocacy, we are speaking up about the disproportionate environmental pollution and political margination. Women are talking about about what harms them as women and families. We work to educate immigrant women about sexual assault and discrimination and human trafficking, and be highly conscious about what harms them, including climate change and environmental disasters.
And Glenda, last word.
Oh boy. I would say first, don't underestimate the threat in this country towards the LGBT community. Literally, I can't keep up on my phone with all the headlines about all of the terrible legislation that is passing in this country that's restricting gender. And let's not leave anybody behind. I think a panelist before me talked about intersectionality, and this is all connected. It all overlaps. Trans women are women. Let's make sure we're standing together.
Thank you, Abiola. It's been a pleasure sharing the dais with you. And please, everyone, join me in a very warm round of applause for our spectacular panelists.
Listen, I got this. Thank you. I'm just going to do it next time. Come on in. All right, someone's got to help us set this up. So where do I sit? I sit here. Wherever you like, but yes, that sounds good to me. And you're going to be our opening act. All right.
We'll flank her in red.
Okay, let me see it, then I can just So, as you saw in the email, hi, I'm Elizabeth. How do you do, Nicole? SEC, bankruptcy.
We're going to flank you in red, we decided.
Oh, that's fabulous. Then we'll put this. This is the last panel. TAC, yes. I think that's so. Here you are. Here I am. This is. Do you need help? You're not going to be sitting in order. You're going to make me work extra hard. Okay.
To challenge you.
Sherry, I will go there. Merengue. Like merengue. So we'll put you here. We'll put her out here. You may sit here.
I mean, it's amazing. You're
so far, so good. We need to move. We need to. We have many extra. We're good. Can you do me a ginormous favor and take these? And also,
but I guess you also have your president.
Yeah, but
these are prior speakers. It's the time of the night when we are swimming in place cards. Julie, I recognize your picture. Thank you again for your email. Jenna, voila, madame. And then Nicola. All right. So,
wherever she
so now I'm going to make a list.
I did plan to mention that. Go ahead.
Would you like water as well? Yes.
I feel so little.
You are
chair.
Nicola Timmons.
Yes.
All right, and Edwin.
Who do you want me to give this to? I'm sorry.
Your
Judge Strong,
Martin. Someone else. I'm not going to give much judge.
This is a delivery, apparently.
And
I'm not, it doesn't say you, but
no.
Give it to you.
We'll follow up. Okay, and then Zoji. And then
excuse me, are you meditating this part?
Am I what? What do you need?
Yeah, I need to pronounce this one and
Merengue's car.
Okay, you want the judge to introduce this?
Okay.
Yes? I can tell her. Sure.
Yeah, it is good because
she would like you to introduce
this is something about and they can.
So I can. Would you like me to mention
get
this?
it outside?
Okay.
And that's why if you need still for more information,
Julie, Megan,
K-I-N-G, yeah.
as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Ladies and ladies and ladies and ladies and gentlemen too. Hi, everybody. Have we had some kind of a night or what? I go back and forth between being a little depressed and a little sad, and then so incredibly uplifted by the energy in the room and the information and the courage and the guts from our speakers. The pressure's on because, of course, the reception started at 8 and it's 8:06, so we better be good. And of course, it was pointed out by my dear friend, and what a moderator, Judge Ridgway, that this is the tech panel. So we got to get our tech right. That's pressure too. I'm Elizabeth Stong. I'm your guide to women and tech, threat or opportunity. There's a longer version of the title, but that's the way I've been thinking about it ever since the organizers were kind enough to ask me to help co-moderate this panel. I looked at the credentials of my extraordinary co-moderator and said, no, she's got to be a speaker. She's actually going to be kind of our mini keynote setting the stage. So that's who you will hear from first. We have, as you can see, a fabulous group, and you've got their bios and the materials. I'll tell you a tiny bit about them, but I want to set the stage by just reminding you what our topic is: empowering women and girls in the digital age. That's good, empowering, right? Protecting women and girls in the digital age. That's important. Limitations. Here comes the hard part, my friends. Limitations of tech for voluntarily providing security for vulnerable and targeted communities. And we've sure heard a lot about those, including minorities and public servants and the judiciary. That one's a little close to home for me personally. It's a big topic. It's an aspirational topic, as I think all of our topics were today. And it's not just a New York City or a New York State or a United States topic. It's a global topic. We may hear a little bit about challenges in Afghanistan, in the Ukrainian situation, the Iranian legal communities, and I've even got a demonstrative for that one. And threats, real threats, close to home threats, but around the world threats to these populations, including, my friends, the judiciary. Yes, it's real. Does anyone else have one of these? It knows where you are. It may, if you also have one of these, know your pulse right now. Mine's probably going up. It knows how many steps you did today. How many are doing that? That would be me, among others. Is it a friend? Is it a foe? Does it keep us safe? I think the answer, hopefully, we'll see from our discussion, is going to be a little bit of all of the above. But we got to be smart about it. We have to own it. We have to remember there are different issues for women and for people who identify as women than there are perhaps from others. And to get that conversation started, I would like to turn to my right to Ugoji Adanma-Eze, who is so many things. Someone said this at the beginning, maybe it was Susan. We are all, everybody in this room is so many things. I think women in particular are so many things. We're daughters, we're mothers, we're wives, we're leaders in our communities, and that can be defined in all kinds of ways. Ugoji is so many things. She's a barrister. She's associated with Gray's Inn. She is an expert on, a thought leader on, among other things, COVID, building back better, climate change. Heard about that recently. Food security, counterterrorism. I'm thinking it'd be easier actually to describe the things you are not an expert in, but she's going to set the stage for this topic: friend or foe, technology and gender. And she's going to do it from the perspective of someone who thinks deeply and programs broadly at the United Nations on all these topics. Over to Ugoji. Thank you so much. You want to appear? Let's speak now.
Thank you so much, Your Honor. I'm absolutely delighted. I'd like to first and foremost say a huge thank you to Catherine for inviting me to speak today, and also to acknowledge the presence of the President of New York City Bar Association. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge welcome to New York City Bar Association's 2023 4th Annual International Law Conference on the Status of Women. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm hugely delighted and honored to be speaking on the theme of empowering women and girls in the digital age and limitations of tech for voluntarily providing security for vulnerable and targeted communities such as minorities, public servants, and the judiciary. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a virtual society where offline violence has extended to online, thus making it easier for people to commit violence without consequences. Women and girls are particularly susceptible to online violence, more particularly women with voices, for example, female politicians, journalists, activists, and above all, the judiciary. Online harassment includes trolling, bullying, cyberstalking, defamation, hate speech, hacking, identity theft, public shaming, amongst other offenses. In short, online gender-based violence is indeed an expression of the ingrained gender inequalities in our society. Online violence is indeed a public health issue, the detriments of which are cross-cutting, namely it manifests itself in sexual, physical, psychological, and above all, economic harm, which all erodes one's self-esteem. It begs the question, what is required? There is a need for public awareness, more particularly the fact that online violence can eventually turn to offline violence. We need robust international laws. There is a need for gender digital security, namely training women and girls and members of the judiciary to protect themselves. The development of an internationally acceptable anti-bullying and harassment tools. I hope that the objective of this event is to provide a platform for the exchange of views, sharing of experiences, and setting goals and targets towards addressing the effects of online cyber harassment and bullying, particularly those related to gender equality and gender-based violence. Accordingly, I hope this platform will provide for participants to highlight challenges that women and girls face daily, to articulate possible solutions to the effect of online harassment and bullying, and above all, to address these challenges. We need to reflect on how the effect of the COVID-19 global pandemic and the increasing frequency of online harassment and bullying has resulted in leaving women and girls behind. There's a need to ensure that we do achieve the United Nations Agenda 2030 and other regional and international agendas. The leading questions which we must consider, ladies and gentlemen, are what can governments and international community do to stop online violence? What does gender digital safety encompass? What are the impacts to women and girls when they experience violence online? Above all, why is it significant to make the distinction between offline and online violence? And finally, how can social media platforms help in mitigating online violence? What are the reporting mechanisms in place for victims of online harassment and bullying? We cannot underscore the importance of schools. What should schools do to comply with existing laws? I do hope that the outcome of this discussion will deepen dialogue among the participants, will synthesize views expressed by the participants, and above all, present the key messages as possible policy and legislative recommendations for mitigating online gender-based harassment and violence. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Absolutely perfect. My new hero. I next
want to ask to hear, I think you can speak from where you're sitting if you'd like, from another one of my new heroes. She'll be yours too in just a moment. I think Miranga's Carr. She's so many things. She's a human rights lawyer from Iran. She's a writer. She's a speaker. She's an activist. She's published over 100 articles on different issues in society and law. She's been an active public defender since the 1980s in Iran in the civil and criminal courts. She's a breast cancer survivor. God bless you, my sister too. I think that's worth a round of applause just for that. She's a Woodrow Wilson Scholar. She was a Radcliffe Fellow. She received the United States National Endowment for Democracy Award, Democracy Leader Award from Laura Bush. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her perspective on technology and tech and the digital threats and opportunities for women and girls. Over to you. And if you pick this up on your way out, you'll learn even more about her work and her organization's work.
Thank you.
Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. And I would like to talk about something that now is happening in Iran, a very modern movement that are leading by very young Iranian women and men. But women were leading this movement, and after that, men followed them. And now it is a very important obstacle for the government. As you know, government in Iran is religious Islamic Republic of Iran, and this modern movement that somebody calls that revolution is against Islamic Republic of Iran and the nature of Islamic Republic of Iran, because they are demanding for a secular government in Iran with equality, gender equality, and more equality between Muslim and non-Muslim and all minority with others. So that's very important, and if am I allowed something talk about this, that probably it would be more than 2 or 3 minutes. Iranian women are playing a critical role in the fight for equality and guiding the direction of this modern revolution. In the past 6 months, tens of thousands of protesters, lawyers, artists, journalists have been arrested for supporting or participating in the protests, even for sharing information about the protest on social media and other platforms. Hundreds were murdered on the streets and behind prison walls. Many died mysteriously within a few days of release from detention. Babies and many children are among the dead. Too many scenes of beating and death had been captured and published by citizens, journalists, and protesters to be able to credibly deny the atrocities being committed. The brutal torture and rape of prisoners has been well and widely documented, again, in part thanks to access to digital means of sharing information. The latest tragic escalation of violence in the past 3 months, girls' schools across the country have been suspiciously targeted with toxic gas attacks. Thousands of girls have been poisoned and taken to hospital. Many are in critical condition. The government is silent and has taken no action to protect or investigate these attacks. The Islamic Republic has gone further to issue an order to the arrest of any parent or person who questions or protests these attacks. Journalists who have reported on these attacks have been arrested. This story began with the arrest of a 22-year-old woman, Gina Mahsa Amini. Mahsa was Kurdish Iranian. She was visiting Tehran when the so-called morality police arrested her because her hair and body were not covered well enough. She was beaten and killed. The journalists that reported her death are imprisoned. Mahsa's death was the match which ignited the powder keg of this woman-led revolution. Women rose up in large numbers and took to the street. They set their server on fire, a scarf on fire, and dance around those fires. Men, especially young men, rose to support their sisters in protest. The Islamic Republic immediately unleashed extreme violence on the protesters. Violence against women, gender apartheid, persecution, oppression, segregation began in the name of Sharia and Islam from the earliest days of the 1979 revolution and was widespread in public and private life. Every generation of Iranian women in modern history that fought against the discrimination. All the advancements made during the Sharia reign were cancelled with post-revolutionary changes in the law. More and more limitations were placed on lawyers, preventing them from representing clients. Arresters are routinely denied the right to select their own lawyers. They are tortured and forced to make false statements and confession. Due process of the law has become a dream. Today, the youngest generation of Iranian women are raising their voices to demand change, demand a secular, non-religious government. This is the third generation post-revolution. They have witnessed the institutionalization of discrimination against women, and their culture is at odds with the Islamic Republic, which continually seeks to limit women. It is regrettable that little attention is being paid by the most powerful governments in the world to the situation of the women in Iran. I specifically wish to address the President Biden and strongly request the United States government to cease attempt to negotiate with the murderers, child killers, Islamic Republic. Any engagement with the Islamic Republic will necessarily embolden them and ensure continuation of this violence against women. The world cannot continue to turn a blind eye to these tragedy. Today, on this International Day of Women, I ask the most powerful nation on earth, its citizens, and the honorable members of this profession to support Iranian women and to especially lend your voices to our effort to return independence to Iranian lawyers and the Bar Association. I thank the City of New York Bar Association for facilitating this conversation. Zan, Jen, Zindagi, Azadi, woman, life, freedom. And more than that, now something is happening in Iran that I think I explained that very briefly, that they are poisoning students of high school in Iran. And they deny that they are doing that, but we are sure, because we do have experience a lot about this government, this Islamic Republic of Iran, that they do such a thing, and then they say that we don't do anything, and it is coming from Israel, it is coming from the United States, and it is not our fault. Please, and please, you be voices of these students of high schools in Iran who really are at risk. Please.
My new hero, your new hero too, I suspect. Miranges Kar, thank you for everything you have done and that you will inspire us to do as well. We are to the lightning round, my friends. Julie King. Julie is also so many things. Julie, she is a lawyer with broad experience, including in industries where women, I'll say, are very well represented and much impacted. Retail, restaurant, hospitality. She's worked in the state AG's office. She's worked in the United States Attorney's office. She's worked at EPA and HHS and practices both in Illinois and Virginia. We're so lucky that she has come here to join us. And by the way, is also part of the International Law Section's Women's Interests Network, a great group, more than a few of us in the room, I think. Julie, empowering women and girls in the digital age. You've got a couple minutes. Share your thoughts.
Sure. I just want to say I'm so happy first to be here. It's a great honor to sit on one of these panels tonight and share my thoughts and be among the company of such amazing women sharing their thoughts on these topics. As mentioned, I am involved in the American Bar Association. I'm involved in the international legal section, and in that, I am a co-editor of something called the Year in Review for the Women's Interest Network. And my co-editor and I, she spoke on a previous panel. We work with Catherine Van Kempen and Elizabeth Sekenter, and we essentially create and work with authors all over the world, amazing attorneys and lawyers, and we author and also edit an article where we update members of the American Bar Association and other individuals all over the world about legal updates. So in our journal, we do talk about technology and how it impacts women and girls. And I will say that there are a lot of legal developments happening in the world that involve this area, which is a really good thing. I kind of grew up in an era kind of in that sweet spot where I had a childhood where I wasn't super impacted by technology. The internet did not come online until I was in 8th grade. I largely lived a girlhood that was exempt from a lot of the things that women and girls have to deal with today. And You know, the world has changed a lot, and technology is wonderful. It brings us knowledge, it brings us information, it brings the world closer, it brings awareness to so many issues. And I'm happy to have grown up before that came online and also be a part of this now, where we have a community of the world that is so close because of technology. But technology is a double-edged sword, and women and girls around the world face a lot of issues related to technology, harassment, bullying. When I grew up, you could kind of just go home and shut your door and then go to school the next day. But today, it's very different from that. Girls and women are constantly connected with technology. There is no escape. And I think, countries have started to acknowledge this, and they have started to memorialize this in their laws. They have, created bodies to address these issues. And, just to kind of share some of these things with you all today, since this is what we do for the year in review, we kind of update about international advancements in law and developments, and sometimes setbacks too. But there have been some gains in the past year or two involving women and girls in technology. And one of those that I'm going to share with you just briefly is that in January of 2022, South Africa amended its Domestic Violence Act of 1998 and expanded the definition of domestic violence to include a number of things, including cyber stalking and cyber abuse. So that is really a great gain, that a country is memorializing this in its definition of domestic violence, that people can be victimized through technology, and they are now including cyber stalking and cyber abuse in their definition as a form of domestic violence. So I think countries are recognizing that technology can be used to perpetuate negative things. In our own country, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2022 established a federal and civil cause of action allowing for recovery of legal fees and damages for those victimized via non-consensual distribution of intimate photos, otherwise known as revenge porn or sexploitation. And so that is huge. That's it. People are in relationships, they share themselves, and it's a really great step to know that there is now a federal civil cause of action that protects victims of this sort of abuse. There's so much I could really talk about, but I guess.
So look for her at the reception.
Yes, look for me there. But I will, give the stage to the rest of my esteemed colleagues up here. But I'm once again just very, very happy to be here and to see and share with you that this is being taken very seriously on the international stage, and laws are being created to protect women and girls because of technology.
My humble suggestion to the city bar is that next year we make this a day-long program. Let's move to, thank you, and let's move to, and thank you again. Just a few more minutes. We're in the home stretch of our lightning round. Edwina Martin is so many things. It's been so much fun to learn about these fabulous panelists, speakers, experts, heroes, sheroes. She was a practicing lawyer in the private sector and then entered the public interest space and then became a public servant. And she now serves, if I have this right, as the commissioner and public administrator in the office of Richmond County. That's Staten Island for you Manhattanites. I'm in Brooklyn, Kings. The public administrator. So what does that mean? If someone dies, sad. If someone dies and they don't have a will, and you can't find anybody, you can't find a family who's not an administrator, That's her job. Edwina figures out what to do with literally the remains, to find the people, what to do with the stuff. Are there family? Are there people to inherit? I think this is a job you must have to do with your head and your heart every single day. I want to say thank you as a New Yorker for doing it, and tell us your thoughts on empowering women and girls in the digital age for at least 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Since I'm a sort of politician, we have to start with thanks. So thank you so much to the City Bar and my
We
dear.
all have to start with thanks. Back to you on that.
And to my dear friend Catherine for inviting me to be a part of this exciting program tonight. I could talk half a day about what I do as the public administrator, but we're here to talk about a different topic right now. And there are 3 points that I want to make. When you were growing up, when I was growing up, my mother used to always say, make sure you mind your P's and Q's. So I don't know if your mother or your dad or your grandparents ever said that to you. So my points are the P's and Q's for this topic. Personal, professional, and question and report. What do I mean by personal? We're all here as lawyers, but we all have, the roles we play in our families and our homes and our communities. And there are things that you can do to address technology and women and girls and empowerment in your personal life. I am very proud to be a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And my sorority has taken a really active role in educating women on coding, on dealing with technology, so that we move from being consumers to the creators, to being in charge, being in control. And I think that's one way we help women, but particularly girls, because they're often the targets right now, in taking control of what it means, of, creating their own things in that space, but also, knowing and understanding how to deal with harassment and problems. So, usually it's a woman-based organization in your community that's doing that kind of work, and get involved. And if you're involved with organizations and they're not doing it, see if you can get interest and get people involved in putting together workshops on coding, on safety and technology, on Grow with Google, which is learning how to actually make Google work for you in your life and moving forward. So that's the personal. The professional, we're all, everyone here is a part of some bar association, or if you're a bar junkie like me, many, many, many bar associations. So they get involved, be an advocate, get involved in the advocacy that they're doing around this topic. What are the relevant committees? You can find them on their websites or by talking to a lot of the amazing people that are in this room right now. I mean, we have the president of the New York State Bar Association. We have the president of the New York City Bar. So we have like the people here in the room, literally at the table, who can point you in the right direction. We have the immediate past president of WABOSNI sitting in the room, Dawn Reed Green. So we have the people in the room, who can point you in the direction on how you can really get involved in advocacy around this. And then finally, question and report. And what do I mean by that? Women often, downplay bad things that are being done to them. Partly because we're super busy and we don't want to deal with it, and we're sort of hoping it will go away if we just ignore it a little bit. And then partly because, we say, well, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad. So I am a public official. And in dealing with administering these estates, I sometimes deal with very unhappy pro se family members who perhaps don't think they're getting what they should in this estate that we're administering. I'm dealing with someone right now who increasingly has become harassing, angry, suggesting violence, and certainly a lot of vitriol. That's really directed. There are a number of people involved with this estate, but it's all directed towards the women who are involved in the administration. And so I had to step back and say to myself, how bad is it if someone came to me, one of my friends, and told me that someone was doing what this person was doing and saying what he was saying, what would I tell them to do? And then I turned that back over on myself, and I realized I need to report this. So I went to the DA's office. So you have to always sort of do that check. Speak with your team, speak with the people that you can with the confidential information that you're dealing with. Step away so that you can make an assessment on what you would tell someone else to do. And if you would tell them to go and report and to take it seriously, then you doggone better do that as well. So I'm going to stop there.
So let's talk about empowering women and girls. Take your own advice. How many of us do that? Not so much. Nicola Timmons does so many things. She's a public servant. She's a trial lawyer. She's an investigator. She's a trailblazer. Her current day job is chief of a newly formed, that's the Trailblazer, Office of Bankruptcy Collections, Distributions, and Receiverships. You're thinking, what? At the Division of Enforcement at the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. That is, she finds the money in the fraud and gets it to the right people and places. Is that more or less it? Something like that? Mission statement. We're thrilled to have you here with us. And the master's degree in sociology, that's intriguing. And I bet it helps when you're thinking out the fraud and where might they put the money. Empowering women and girls through tech. Is it friend or foe? Share with us your thoughts, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel. I have to give a disclaimer, as a member of the SEC, that the views and comments that I share with you tonight are my own views and comments and do not reflect the views of the commission or its staff. Okay?
Well done.
Like Julie said, my primary responsibility at the SEC is returning money to harmed investors. Last year, we returned about $1 billion to harmed investors. And, I am uniquely cognizant of the fact that, that population includes vulnerable folks, women, elderly folks. And so I'm always trying to figure out how do we mitigate the risks, the threats to our program. I think people hold federal regulators to a higher standard, right? So we're supposed to be transparent. We're supposed to have integrity in the process. We're supposed to make sure that we get the money back to the right people in a timely and efficient manner. But it's difficult in this digital age because of hacking, because of phishing, because of all types of online schemes. And there's a lot of pressure on us to do things more electronically based, allow people to file electronic claims, make electronic payments. But with all of those conveniences comes additional risk and threats and fraud. And so I'm constantly thinking about that because I don't want to do anything to disenfranchise, to disempower, the folks that we are charged to protect. And so I was intrigued by this panel because, I wanted to hear different ways that people are also, thinking about how do we protect women in this digital age where, it's just the way society is evolving. And I know that we have to evolve with the times, but by the same token, I think we have to make sure that we are doing things in a way that we are protecting those that we, have been charged to serve. So I'll just kind of stop there.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sensitivity to the most vulnerable. It's wonderful to hear that. We are to the one who needs no introduction, as none of our panel does, but to someone you've already heard called out as the current New York State Bar President. I'll get to that part. My good friend Sherry Levin-Wallach is, you know what I'm going to say? She's so many things. She's so many things. She's a former private practitioner, but she didn't just practice. She started her own firm and her name was on the door. I can tell you that when I was at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, my name was not on the door. What an accomplishment. She was a prosecutor. She was assistant district attorney in Bronx County. And after that, I think immediately after that, at some point after that, took on the role that led to the position she now has in the Legal Aid Society of Westchester County, where she's the deputy executive director. And of course, she's the 125th president of the New York State Bar Association, which is a pretty cool gig. I've seen President Wallach, I've seen Sherry run the House of Delegates. I've seen her move policy through the State Bar and the ABA and do it with class and do it with aplomb and grace, and in a way that makes me think this is a justice fighter, where when she fights, justice wins, but somehow nobody loses. It's an extraordinary thing. I'm thrilled to have you take us home, our last speaker, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on women and girls and technology.
Well, Judge, wow, thank you.
I
am humbled. I am absolutely humbled, not only by your remarks and introduction, but be able to be here this evening amongst such really an outstanding group of women, trailblazers and leaders from around the world. It is quite an honor, and I thank Catherine and Susan for bringing me here and for your support and all the work that you do as Bar Association, as we like to say, not only leaders but junkies, which we are. But wrapping up this evening, so what a lot was said and how much we have to think about. And I was thinking, sitting here as the last speaker of the evening, there's so much that I would like to add and speak about, but I'm going to keep my remarks relatively short. And I will do so, but trying to engage and thread through some of the things that we've heard throughout this evening and how it applies to this topic. So let me start with this. When I took on the presidency of the New York State Bar Association, I also took on the motto, investing in the future of our profession. And as I sit here this evening on this panel, I think, well, wasn't that an appropriate motto to take on? Who knew that when I was going to be asked to speak on this panel, particularly on women and girls and technology. However, when we think about the work of bar associations and we think about the work that we do in our communities, we think about the fact that we are constantly looking forward, and in particular, I believe women are constantly looking forward. We're trailblazing all the time and trying to find the ways to create policy and protect not only the rights of all people, but in particular to blaze that trail for the women that come after us. And so I commend everyone here really for doing that. And I want to harken back to something that was said a bit earlier on one of the other panels, which is education. And I really want to focus my moment and my comments this evening on that, because as was said by one of my fellow panelists this evening, we have to start with education. If we don't start with education, we can't get to the policy making. And I really commend her for saying that and for bringing that out this evening. And at the New York State Bar Association, I like to think especially that that's exactly what we do. We form task forces and committees, and we have sections, and we educate. And we educate so that we can be informed in our decision making. And in particular, when we think about this topic, when we think about women and girls and technology, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to educate them. They need to understand not only the technology, but the implications of the use of the technology, and of course, how they can use that technology in a positive way to move them forward so that they too can become trailblazers and women in the law and in our communities and leaders. So to that end, we think about a number of different things. I will point out in particular in the New York State Bar Association, the Women in the Law section, our chair, Cheryl Galler, was here this evening to join us. And that section came out of a committee. It was formed into a section because we needed to address these issues. And I actually remember sitting at the executive committee meeting when the first chair of that section, our soon-to-be treasurer, Susan Harper, came in and had this proposal that maybe at some point we could become a section. And I remember leaning over and saying, how about right now? What are we waiting for? And we did it. And that section has really led the charge on so many issues facing women and women in the law, and combining and working together with all of the other groups within the association, our technology and the law committee, and my task force on Web3, the metaverse, emerging digital finance, and currency. These are all issues that relate to educating and learning how to educate and collaborate so that we don't get into those situations where we are endangered, our daughters are endangered, and our communities are endangered. So the New York State Bar Association led the path for the cybersecurity CLE that we now have as a requirement. Important. Again, we must educate and we must empower. And so I like to bring that to some of the things that we've been working on recently this year at the New York State Bar Association that really tie this together. And it's interesting as you sit here and you hear all the comments. Well, what is one of the things that are most important about women in the law and the impact of technology on young girls, the things we've heard today? And a large part of that is we have to be cognizant of the impact that has on their mental health and on trauma that it causes them and on their well-being. And not knowing that I'd be sitting here this evening, one of the task forces I created was exactly mental health and trauma impacted representation. And we are looking at how we can find ways within our community, empower our community, create policies and legislation that will continue to provide the resources to support those individuals who are living with trauma and mental illness so that they can find the way to be productive and involved in our communities in a really positive way. And thank you. And the other part of that, of course, is the well-being of all of us, the well-being of those of us that represent individuals who are living with mental illness and trauma. And again, I want to bring that back to technology because it largely is based in that. And so I think, at the New York State Bar Association, we put an extra amount of effort into our attorney well-being programming. We've increased our resources. We have a 24-hour hotline. And I think it's important when we talk about these issues that I bring those resources up to this group, share it amongst yourselves, your colleagues, your families. And then, of course, I have to kind of end some of my comments, and there's so much more to say, but talking about where we are now, the Web3, the metaverse, because we're talking about technology and we're talking about how that's impacting us all. And so in creating that task force to look at that and the work that we're doing with the New York State Bar Association and the New York City Bar Association now just announced their task force similarly, I think the importance is to make sure that we're engaging women and young students, young women students in this space. It is, as we can see already, dominated largely by men, another space in the law dominated largely by men. So I encourage that we bring women into it because, again, the more we know, the more we can help shape those policies that will ultimately protect us. And so I think bringing all of these things together in the end, we must recognize that we've come a long way. Yes, we have 100 years of suffragette, and we're proud to say that, but we have so much more work to do. And I think for all of us in this room and those of us who have spoken this evening, we embrace that. We embrace that because we know that we can continue to impact that change. And so I will close at this moment with that thought. And I'd like to leave you just with one further comment because I'm sitting here and she's staring down at me, RBG, right there. And I'm sitting here thinking, and I had to add this thought to close this evening and bring it kind of to a close, which is this, what she said, which is real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. So thank you.
Fabulous. My friends, we have run a little late. Blame me. They were fabulous. Thank them. One week from today is RBG's 90th birthday. Don't forget it. Please celebrate it. It's special. This is really personal now. 97 years ago, my dad was born. Today is my father's birthday. He passed a while ago, more than 15 years ago, but after I was a judge. And whenever he'd see me, he would say, "You're a judge, right?" And he'd kind of laugh. And this is real personal. I figured this out the other day, March 8th. It was a funny thing that I was sworn into the bar. Do you know your bar birthdays when you were sworn into the bar? Mine is the same as my dad's, so this is my bar birthday. And my friend, somehow, I must have been 16, right? This is my 40th anniversary as a member of this incredible profession. So thank you for letting me share that with you, both the fact and the evening. And I'm just going to pick up where you left off. What are we waiting for? Nothing, right? We're done. Declare victory. Thank you, my fabulous panelists. Thank you, my fabulous friends. What's next? Do we process? We have musicians. Oh, my goodness. And I did make a promise, and I'm going to keep it. I want to ask Juliana Liu to stand up and wave. Find this lady at the reception. You won't be sorry you did. Peace, Non-War Zone. That's her organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you. And tonight, me and my sister, we are really honored and happy to be here tonight.
I never promised we were going to stay on time, except to Judge Stong, and I can tell you we're a little late. But we have a wonderful, wonderful musical presentation or performance by our two beautiful sisters from Ukraine. As all of you know, just over a year ago, I'm going to refrain from cursing, even though I'd like to. Putin invaded Ukraine, and he has wreaked utter devastation on that country. I heard Oksana Telepko and her sister Hala Levsky play about 4 months ago in New Jersey, and I was so deeply moved. The first year that we had the New York City Bar, this event, we had an opera singer open the event. And I was going to invite her back, but when I heard Oksana and Halya play, I thought that there would be no better way to honor Ukraine and the Ukrainian people than to have them here tonight as our special guests. So without further ado, they will play 2 or 3 songs, and then we will get you your awards, and you can hang out, take pictures, meet one another, but then the night will close. So thank you so much, and without any further delay, here are the beautiful sisters.
Thank you, Kathy. It's an honor for us to be here tonight. Thank you, everyone, for supporting Ukraine in this tough, it's really hard time for Ukraine. And I'm so happy my sister came here. And tonight we would like to sing the first song. It's called My Mother's Embroidered Shirt. And as you can see, me and my sister Halia, we were in the shirts. Our mom, she made it and made our shirts, as we have so many, as she did. And the song is about young boy, and he's going to war. And who would think in this 21st century we have the war again, and people's dying, and children, women. And in this song, when son was going to war, mom said, remember that shirt I gave you, embroidered shirt, and keep it, and that shirt will protect you from anything, and remember my love.
Вишийте, матусю, вишиванку, де барвисті квіти розцвіли, ті, що милували коло ганку, ті, що найдорожчими були. Вишита калина обігріє сина, птиця на калині сум журбу склює. Моя Україна, моя солов'їна, хай не перев'яне вишиття твоє. Хай в годину ранньої розлуки вишиванка душу пригорта, півником червоним на калині, чорна нитка смутку додає. Вишита калина обігріє сина, птиця на калині сум журбу склює. Моя Україна, моя солов'їна, хай не перев'яне вишиття твоє. Хай шуміла віку половина, вишиванка душу пригорта, бо її торкались ваші руки, ваша зігрівала доброта. Вишита калина обігріє сина, птиця на калині сум журбу склює. Моя Україна, моя солов'їна, хай не перев'яне вишиття твоє. Вишийте, матусю, вишиванку, вишийте, матусю, вишиванку.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And the second song we would like to sing, it's a White Blossom. It's about women, girl, and it's whenever the girl will go, she can find her love, her future. You just need to have hope, faith, and love.
співати. Квітко моя, зірко моя, як тебе знайти? Квітко моя, зірко моя, як тебе знайти? Я піду в луги шовкові, в трави голубі, серце солоне нелюбові принесу тобі. Облітають, облітають весняні сади. Квітко моя, зірко моя, як тебе знайти? Квітко моя, зірко моя, як тебе знайти? Хай тумани, хай морози на мою літу, у надії і тривозі я до тебе йду. Хай літа пливуть, як роси, як лунають. Хто шукає, той знаходить доленьку свою. Хто шукає, той знаходить доленьку свою. Хто шукає, той знаходить доленьку свою.
Thank you very much. And the last song, it's a little bit happy because life has to go on. We have a sad moments and we have a happy moments, but we always have to try to be happy and think for the happiest moment. So the next song, it's a happy song about a boy and girl. The girl stayed home, but her boy said, "Can you come outside?" And she said, "No, I can't because my mom said I have to stay home. Just go a little bit and then we're gonna just talk and then we're gonna dance." But and the girl, so of course she went outside and they danced together.
Ішов козак потайком, ішов козак потайком, до дівчини серденько вечірком, до дівчини серденько вечірком. Ой, дівчино, відчини, ой, дівчино, відчини, своє моє серденько звесели, своє моє серденько звесели. Ой, не буду відчинять, ой, не буду відчинять, бо ти будеш серденько жартувать, бо ти будеш серденько жартувать. Жартували до зорі, жартували до зорі. Поки стало виднесенько на дворі, поки стало виднесенько на дворі, ой, козаче, утікай, ой, козаче, утікай, та й на мене славоньки не пускай, та й на мене славоньки не пускай.